And Emmanuel, you heard the chief of staff here. Is that message going to be effective to those reservists who are saying, we stress that they're not going to volunteer, this is voluntary duty, but still vital for the IDF if these reforms go forward or are enacted on?
Hopefully will. I mean, as you said, the reserve duties who would refuse to show up, they wouldn't be, refusing to serve in the army. They don't have to, they're volunteering. But on the other hand, the phenomenon is widespread today. There are more and more reservists saying that they will not serve in the Air Force, which is, of course, critical to Israel's security.
And not replaceable because it takes years to train those pilots.
And I think that here we also need not only the chief of staff, but the prime minister to talk to them, and maybe on behalf of his government to apologize for insulting them, because many of the cabinet members have basically insulted the Air Force officers, and there was even a short movie that had been shortly aired on the social media describing the Air Force as traitors to the army.
Right, and that was shared by some members of the government.
And many of the cabinet members are draft dodgers. They did not serve in the army. And they're the one insulting our best soldiers. So I think it's also the prime minister who should talk to the soldiers and apologize on behalf of his government for insulting them. And then the prime minister himself had committed to only pass legislation on judicial reform based on broad national consensus, which didn't happen. So I think he has to talk as well.
Right. I'll just also note, speaking of, I'm not going to use the word insult, but problematic for the government is the United Torah Judaism, a member of the coalition, holding ministerial positions today, introducing a law that would basically codify draft deferments for all ultra-Orthodox students in religious seminaries. The Likud quickly came out saying that we're not going to bring that up, but certainly could be seen as a poke in the eye.
And the timing couldn't have been worse. I mean, basically, don't forget also that many of the journalists and social media activists from the supporters of the Netanyahu government and of the ultra-Orthodox parties keep using the expression of privileged members of the Israeli society. They call, the pilots privileged crybabies, and what is more than privilege when you have the privilege, when basically, I mean, I think it's a privilege to serve in the IDF, but basically when they're trying to grant themselves immunity from serving in the army, special rights, that everybody by law has to serve in the army except them, and they're talking about privilege, that is privilege. And the timing couldn't be worse, as you said. It's really poking Israeli society in the eyes.
All right, well, certainly this is going to be a major issue for the government and certainly for Prime Minister Netanyahu having to deal with the blowback, this particular blowback, perhaps the most serious of all the implications from the judicial reform. Emmanuel Navon, Dr. Emmanuel Navon, thank you for joining us. And speaking of security,